Oh hey, I'm glad you're here. In this episode, I do what I want. Look, I wanted to talk to Nolan. Despite my scheduling issues and my internet misinformation, we made it work. That's right, and if you don't like it, you can just listen to this episode, let it play, and then subscribe, and also subscribe on your loved one's devices. Yeah, all of them. Then also, I don't know, 5-star reviews in yours and your loved one's accounts, and then tell your friends. They say kill him with kindness, so murder me. Just like mention it during confession. If you're at the dentist, be like, how hard to know. Or during your physical, just VHS is a really good podcast. That's all I'm saying. I mean, look, if you really want to stick it to me, sign up and support us via patreon.com/VHS podcast. For as low as $1 a month, you get access to all my rants about things like Pumpkinhead 1 through 4, or this week's post about the La Casa film series, if you can call it that. Plus, everyone, no matter the level of support on our Patreon, is eligible for our monthly prize giveaway, including hard-to-find DVDs, Blu-rays, hot sauce, freeze-dried candies, cards, stickers, and more. If you really want to make me mad, then win a $100 prize package by supporting us for just $3 a month. Ooh, it just gets my hamburger steaming. That's a saying, right? But seriously, every little bit helps. And I'm not even going to tell you a story about the video store days. I'm just going to throw right to the episode. How about them apples? The films are a double feature. My guest is Nolan McBride, and this is VHS Presents Whatever the I Want. Hello, and welcome to VHS, the podcast where sometimes I do whatever I want. Who am I? I'm your host, Dirk Marshall, and the premise for this episode is a little bit different. We'll be looking at two movies that might seem unrelated, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. So my guest for this episode is the host of the Dead Ringers podcast, Nolan McBride. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me on. It's been great because I've been a listener, so now it's fun to be on here.
Oh, that's so kind. Yes, I heard you on Schlock and Awe, and you and Lindsay both knew the podcast. And so I was just like, oh, that's so awesome. And I had been listening to your podcast as well. But before we get too far, why don't you please tell people what DRP, that's what I call it, what Dead Ringers podcast is.
The quick pitch is movies that share a lot of DNA but have distinct personalities, and that can like shift, but I do try to enforce a certain amount of like closeness rather than, maybe something like we're doing tonight, which is a little bit more of like there's kind of an interesting kernel between them, but then they're very different otherwise.
Yeah.
And we do occasionally do those, but typically it's trying to like talk about how different people approach similar sort of subjects or similar themes depending on what we're getting into.
Yeah, fantastic. And that sort of was the kernel for this episode, is hearing you on Schlock and On. I was like, I want to talk to that person. And then I remembered a blog that I had seen that said that there was these two movies that came out the same year, and it was the same premise. And I was like, well, this is perfect. But, I trusted a blog that I had come across, and they hadn't done due diligence. It was the same basic premise, and big budget versus small budget, but it was 2 years apart, and there was a lot of just differences. So it's basically very similar to or not too similar, but us having the conversation that we're going to have, because it wasn't the initial thing that I thought. The first idea, I was like, well, this is perfect. It's what you kind of do. This is like an introduction for my listeners to what you're doing there. And then it didn't work out. And so I reached out to you and was like, look, we've had all these scheduling things, really want to have this conversation. And you were awesome and came up with 5 different options, I think, and we'll get to what those are. So, we will be talking about Bless the Child from 2000 and The Predators from 2018. 2 very different movies, but where children are the key to human survival, basically.
Yep.
Which is very weird. Up first, we'll talk about Bless the Child, directed by Chuck Russell. Had you seen this movie before?
No. And it's one, until we got to it, I did not realize this was a Chuck Russell movie. And then when I had rented it, I did see that its Rotten Tomato rating is 3%. And I feel like that has to be the fact that just people didn't know this movie existed.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't make sense. It's a perfectly serviceable, and I say serviceable in not in a negative way at all. It's just it is that sort of very middle of the road mainstream thriller of the time, but it's playing with subject matter that I really, really love. And my wife too, we put it on because I was like, this, I feel like it's going to be right up your alley. And it was, because it's satanic cults, kidnapping children, fighting over the power of the world basically. And it's just like it's way more ambitious and like I don't know, complicated than you'd expect from what I kind of always assumed it was, which was just like a child kidnapping story. But like there's a serial killer angle, and like
Yeah.
that's got a satanic angle. Like that's why it was kind of actually easy to send you ideas, because as I was watching the movie, there was just like hitting me with so many different things that it's just, playing into similar beats that you see a lot. But it was a fun little mishmash of sort of like thriller and occult that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I can't believe I'd never seen this or heard of it. I hadn't
I've
even
never heard anyone talk about it either.
I was alive in the year 2000, and what? Like, just the cast that we'll get to, it's ridiculous. I don't understand how even on video store shelves I didn't see this. I lived right by a video store at the time. I was renting constantly. I don't understand
Mm.
what happened here. But for those who don't know who Chuck Russell is and why we're so stoked that he was involved, he directed Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Eraser, The Mask, and of course 1988's
Blob.
The Blob. Yes.
Yes.
The synopsis of this film is Cody, a little girl abandoned by her mother and raised by her aunt, a nurse, is kidnapped. The girl's guardian, aided by FBI agents, learn that Cody has supernatural abilities, and the abductees are a satanic cult willing to do anything to gain them. What a synopsis! Very concise, I guess.
Yeah.
The cast, we have Kim. How do you say her last name?
I say Basinger.
Okay, okay. I say Kim Basinger.
Yeah.
The
I think I add more like the hard letter to it versus I feel like what's the opposite? Passenger?
Basinger.
Oh yeah. I guess I add more of the hard G
Okay,
there.
I think I do too. And then when I feel like fancy, like Grey Poupon, I say Kim Bassinger. I think that's when I'm.
That's if she's in like a kind of a prestige role,
Yes.
which again, this is very much I don't mean this in a negative way, but this is very much like a B movie in a lot of ways. And that's why it actually feels perfect for Chuck Russell to be doing
Yeah.
it. Like
Yeah.
that's like right in his wheelhouse. And
Right.
again, not a negative, like he's great at those. Like the Blob is incredible.
Yeah. The Blob's amazing. We also have Jimmy Smits. We have Rufus Sewell, who I love.
Yeah. Yeah. So many people.
Angela Bettis. I love Angela Bettis, and I can't believe I missed her in this huge motion picture. Christina Ricci, for crying out
Yep.
loud. Like,
Yeah.
and a severely underused Ian Holm. By the time Ian Holm shows up in the movie, I was just like, are you kidding me with this? Like, he looks like they didn't even ask him to shave. He has like 8 lines. And I'm like, that's your use of Ian Holm in the year 2000? Unbelievable.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
written by Clifford Green, who wrote Space Camp, Baby, and The Seventh Sign, and Thomas Rickman, who did The Coal Miner's Daughter. So interesting between the two of them. I don't know if one person gave it to the other. Can't imagine those two writing together at the same time, but maybe rewrites happened.
Yeah. Seventh Sign makes sense with this, but nothing else in there sounded
Yeah,
like
Baby, the
this
dinosaur
doesn't.
movie.
Yeah. Right.
What? Now that a satanic dinosaur movie I would watch.
That would be
Right?
incredible.
Okay. So I guess we'll start just talking through the beats of what happens within this movie, Bless the Child. We begin with Angela Bettis showing up with a baby on Kim's doorstep. Angela's an addict. There's something wrong with the baby. She steals a wallet and leaves. Very quick to ditch the
Yep.
baby. It kind of like, gets things going really quickly and then launches into like a montage of years passing as she raises the baby. We're just like right into it. It's like, okay.
Yeah. It jumps forward really quick.
Yeah.
Have you caught up with Evil Dead Rise yet?
Yes. Just watched it.
I just saw it this week too, and that opening scene just reminded me a little bit of Evil Dead Rise, because you got the sort of like downtrodden, maybe
Yeah.
drug addict sister coming to the more like upstanding one for help, and kind of screwing her in the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. It doesn't go so well either. Maybe they were big
But
Bless the
yeah,
Child fans.
yeah,
You
clearly,
never, you
clearly,
never know. And this is where they introduce the theme of something that we'll be talking about in this episode, that the doctor thinks the
yes.
child is autistic, so she needs to go to a special education at a Catholic place. I don't know, do you have any history with anyone on the spectrum, either with Asperger's or autism in your life?
Not really, not at least not anyone close to me. I'm not aware of anyone in my family that has it. I think, as we get into, I think both of these movies are clear examples of Hollywood being very flippant with it. And I mean, something that still is around to this day, to where M. Night Shyamalan movies have a lot of frequent use of
Yeah.
either mentally ill or autistic people have special powers. So it comes up a lot, surprisingly.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because I worked in a special education behavioral classroom for 10 years, nonverbal, a lot of the students severely impacted by autism. And so my heart is definitely into that sort of work. So I just wanted to say,
Mhm.
as people listen to us discuss this, we're talking about a movie, characterizations of people. We're painting with broad strokes because this is entertainment. In fact, I've been at the game for 9 years, so even if I use terminology that's dated, just know that our hearts are in the right place, and we're not speaking from a point of saying that, like, this is how people are or are not. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
preface it that way because I'm really sensitive to these kind of portrayals, and I'm very quick to be like, come on, just because the kid like is gonna save the world, they have to be like, well, they're special, and by special we mean this, and it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, I get it. Or they're like, well, the kid is autistic, but don't worry, they can fly, or whatever they do in movies. It's just like going back to movies like Powder and things like that. Or people could just be people. I don't know. I don't want to get on my soapbox, but both of these films, I'm just like, they could also just be kids. Aside from the plate spinning thing, that they're like, well, kids
Yeah.
on autism, they STEM, and that means that they do repetitive motions for calming needs. Okay, sure. But also, it doesn't further the plot at all. Like, it's just,
Nope.
okay, fine. So, just to put that out there, as we talk about these two films that are tied by this idea that, like, is very, very, very Hollywood, as you said.
And I will just say too, like I feel like this happens not a lot, but it's happened a couple of times with the show where like it can be very easy when you're looking for unique traits within movies to hone in on things that end up othering people essentially. So
Mm,
like, yeah, I do try to avoid stuff like that or stuff that ends up being a weird parallel that I don't necessarily want to invoke. Like I wouldn't maybe necessarily go with it, but I think actually you're a good person to have this conversation with where we can like work it out
yeah.
and talk through those things. Again, it can be very easy to just be totally flippant about that stuff. And yeah, I think neither of these movies, they're both fine. I don't want to like pass
No,
judgment on the movies,
I get
but
it.
I don't think either of them treats autistic people very well. And again, not an expert. You have much more experience, but like to me, it's always read as very much like, yeah, you're playing with that in a way that's like not necessarily true to life. And
Yeah, that well, the thing for me is like, especially working one on one with a variety of people, is each person's an individual, and we all, regardless of our classifications or labels we received in our life, like we all have our pluses and minuses, and it's like a constant thing in movies to be like, here's this kid, this is what's wrong with them, but wait, and it's just like, well, you don't have to do the first part. Like, I don't, if that
yeah,
makes sense, I don't know. I wasn't a part of the diagnoses part. I never focused on that. I just focused on the person, and I think that that's like hard to. You can't do that in a movie, obviously. So they have to just work really quickly, I guess, and be like, here's the label. But they could have. I mean, obviously, I don't mean to rewrite a movie, but like you could easily just be
yeah.
like, there's something about this kid that's different, and that's it. Like, I don't know if in 2000 this was like the cool thing to incorporate into your demonic end of days movies, but like,
Yeah, it feels like it's what people were grappling with at the time. And so obviously, even within the last 23 years since this movie came out, things have advanced a lot to where like the depictions in this are pretty quaint in a lot of cases.
yeah,
But, it was still pretty new at the time. So I can, again, it's easy not to pass too much judgment on them. It cracked me up that the scene in which like the doctor is like giving her all this information is like it's like he's telling her she is a terminal
yes,
diagnosis
yeah.
or like learning disability is a learning disability, but like it's not the same as like there could be it's just delivered so gravely that it's like this is absurd.
Yeah, that's the parts that usually really upset me because they don't understand the strength of a person. And so then their idea of a strength that they give them is like they have wings and they can like, or Rain Man situation. Like that was hugely detrimental to like people with autism for a long time because then if you're high functioning, everyone's like, "Well, can you count matches if I drop them on the ground?" And it's just like that's not thanks a lot, Rain Man. Like that's,
Yeah,
it's the depictions, but I guess maybe it's all part of a slow, painful learning curve for people to start understanding things better, and I don't know, but it's not going to start with bless the child. That's all I'm saying.
yeah,
3 years later, we see Cody spin plates on a floor, which is exactly what we were just talking about, and then the
yeah,
newspaper alerts us to child murderers. This movie works
yeah,
pretty
four.
fast, pretty fast. We then watch a man actually abduct a child, which I was just like, wow, okay, they really go for
the
it here.
the best part is that he like taunts the kid. He's like, "Yeah, but you probably can't take care of a puppy." He's like, "Yeah, I could."
Yeah.
And then he's like, okay, get in my van. He's like, all right.
I'm gonna
You're just like,
I'm
what?
gonna take care of this puppy, all right. No. Yeah.
I'll show him by getting kidnapped. Yeah.
Yeah, if you look in a van and see a puppy in a cage, don't get in it. Just a
Right?
good rule of thumb. Rufus Sewell leads the New Dawn. It's like a cult that is also satanic, I'm guessing. That's what I was getting from the
Yeah.
film. Yeah, they all have cool tattoos as well.
And it all comes across very much as like Scientology.
Yes.
Like the way they talk about everything, like it's like, okay, this is very much in the vein of something like Scientology.
Yeah, but it doesn't go after rich people. It just goes after dirty teenagers. It's like, it's what a
Right?
weird target demographic, but okay.
Yep.
Someone's killing and branding kids, and then Cody's drawing them. So we're like, oh, Cody's psychic, maybe? I don't know. Cody brings a dead bird back to life, and then the kidnappers see
Yes.
because they just happened to be outside of that church at the time, which I was like, I
Yeah.
love convenient storytelling like that in movies where they're just like, oh, the bad guy was in that one spot in a giant city. Like, it's,
Right. He's always observing.
yeah, it's really fantastic. Christina Ricci shows up at Nicole's hospital, and
Yeah.
she says, "I'm sketching," which is not a terminology I've
I
ever
love that. I
a
love
drunk
that. It was
person's
like,
ever
okay,
said.
she's strung out, aka sketching.
I'm sketching. It's like, no, I've known people kicking very hard drugs, and no one ever said like, "Ooh, I'm sketching right now." Like, it's just like, okay, somebody very
Yeah.
old wrote that line.
Yes, agreed.
We then get a scene with swarming CGI rats in a room, and I was like, oh, I'm all in for this. I didn't think this type of thing was going to happen in the movie. I thought
Yeah.
where this movie goes, first of all, very much more entertaining than what I thought was going to happen. I thought we would have
Yeah.
maybe a little like possession, maybe a little milky eyelid kind of stuff, but like this like swarming rat situation, although it is like the year 2000 CG stuff, I was like, kudos to them. I mean, they really go for the look of this thing. And then when it's over, she has the scratches on her wrist where I was like, hold on. Are
Yeah.
they real rats now, or what are we playing with here?
Yeah. To what you're saying, I thought a lot of the sort of more supernatural elements were going to just be implied.
Yeah.
And even though they are a lot of them sort of like visions or hallucinations, like the fact that we see these like flying gargoyle demons a bunch of
Oh, yeah,
times
we'll get to that.
was so we'll get to the ones at the end, but like there's some really cool imagery that again for 2000 CGI looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Like
There's an effect that we're definitely going to talk about it towards the end where I was just like,
yes.
this is rad. Like, I can't
Yes,
believe that
it's
this
so,
happened.
again, how is there nobody talking about
I
this
don't.
movie? There's like some legit really cool stuff.
And the cast, like, that's the thing is they just keep going,
Yes.
who hid this? Like, there's Kim, depending on how you say her last name, Jimmy Smits, Rufus Sewell, Christina Ricci. It's just like, any of these, I should have been aware of this thing. And yet I was just like, I think I've heard of this. And then I looked it up and was like, nope, no, I know nothing about this.
Like in my head, I think I conflated it with stuff like The Order, like the Heath Ledger or something
yep.
from around. I don't even think that has anything to do with a child. And no, it's just also religious horror from like there was a bunch around the millennia. Like
Yep.
I threw out one End of Days because this also has the same like
Yes.
it feels like millennium anxiety, and it's like Satan's gonna come kill us all.
Mm-hmm. That's what we were hoping, really. We're like, clear the debt or just murder us all, Satan. It's either one of those two things, like shut down the banks or just burn it all down.
You did neither.
No, so I'm still waiting. Then Cody makes all the prayer candles light, and a statue cries, and and Kim's just like, okay, come here, and just like hugs her. I was like, a statue just straight up wept in front of you? Like, okay, well.
Yeah, she said the statue was very sad for us.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay.
Okay, good reasoning. All right. Rufus and Angela reappear, Angela being Angela Bettis, and then they brought Cody a doll, which I was like, that doll is coming back for sure. It doesn't.
Yeah.
That weird evil doll she gets.
Oh yeah.
It looks so messed up, and I was like, hell yes, we're gonna see so much of this doll. Never see it. Never see it again. I don't even know why it's there.
A lot of plates spinning.
Yes, exactly. And then they want Cody, but Kim says no, and then she's stolen from her bedroom. And then Christina breaks it all down that the cult is killing kids, but wants to make Cody be like Rufus Sewell, who's dark, because she will lead everyone to God. I'm not a huge, like, God versus Satan fan of movies, usually, because there's, like, a part where the priest like reads from the Bible and that solves all the problems, and I'm like, I'm not buying it. But in this one, they're very light on all the religious stuff, despite being in numerous churches and lots of nuns and stuff. It's like it's not a lot of that. They just go, yeah, this little kid's probably gonna lead us to God or whatever, and you get that. Then we just move on to the next scene. It's like, very weirdly constructed script.
Well, it feels accessible in that way where it's like, yeah, they kind of just use like the demon or angel iconography and avoid any of the like deep seated sort of religious stuff. And honestly, that's the best part. You just want to have some
Same.
crazy, demons and angels fighting each other.
Uh,
Although I guess the angels in this are kind of just like glowing light.
yeah, which is also great because you're just
Yeah.
kind of like, what is that? Which is what you would be thinking if you saw something like that, rather than someone in like a
Yeah.
flowy robe with bird wings. Christine has then chased and Kim gets jumped. And the jump scare worked on me so well when the person leapt out from behind the pillar and struck her with a pipe. I was
Uh-huh.
like, I had headphones on. I'm like 8 feet, I mean, not 8 inches from the TV, like, and I just was like, whoa, like it just really got me. And then Christina's
Yeah.
getting pummeled. She's being
Yes.
bludgeoned to death. And then we get our first CGI swarm of demons. And I was just like, did this movie just become one of my favorite movies? I'm not quite sure, but I did not expect Demon Swarm.
Yeah.
And then Christina's head falls off. I was just like, this is what?
That was the other one too. It was great because like my wife had either left the room or like did something and she missed that part. And I was like, okay, wait, did you see that? And she's like, what? And I was like, rewound it. It's just such a good moment. And again, feels so over the top.
Yes.
It seems like they bludgeon her to death and then cut her head off and set it
Yeah.
up on top.
And
Like
clear the
it's just
blood
like
away.
a lot of like it's like a yeah, it's just a lot of steps they did to like have this perfect thing happen, which there's another one we'll get to later where like the cult has some fascinating like ability to make things happen.
Yeah, because they also weren't stabbing her. They're beating her with crowbars. And when they
Yeah.
position her, she looks totally fine. And then her
Yep.
head falls off.
Yep. Similarly, like that was the scene when I was like, okay, wait, this actually seems pretty cool
Mm.
because it again, and a million other things, this reminded me a lot of like Constantine.
Uh-huh.
And like, the way he's able to see like, the stuff happening around. And so like those little touches went a long way to like making this feel much bigger and much more interesting than, like the kind of stuff you're used to from this.
Yeah, and they introduced the swarm of demons with head trauma. So there's part of me that was just like, oh, she's out of it. Like she's just seeing something that maybe it's not there at all. And then as the movie progresses, I was like, oh, it is all there? I guess. That's wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kim heads to the address that Christina gave her, and she sees more demons and ghouls just lurking about outside the building, like gargoyles. That's just in broad daylight. I was like, okay, so it's not head trauma anymore. That's very weird. They're hiding Cody in this building. Kim gets chloroformed and wakes up driving.
That's the scene. That's the one I was trying. Where I was like, wait a minute. She has woken up. She's deep into the stream of cars going against traffic on a busy New York City bridge.
Yeah.
I'm like, how was she conscious enough for the first? Was someone in the car with her and they bailed out the door and then she took control? Like, what's the deal? It's so great.
It's so wild. And then she's rescued by an angel in denim. Is that what? Am I reading this moment properly?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's another thing that comes up is like, I joke with my wife. I was like, in this universe, God is so responsive. Like,
Yes.
anytime someone is literally like, God, can you just help me out a little bit? Literally the next second, somebody shows up and helps them. But like Jimmy Smits does it when he's sitting in the office at one point, and he's like, I could really use something. And the janitor shows up, gives him a pep talk,
Yeah.
says he's not alone, moves on. This angel shows up, rescues her. There's another one where Kim Basinger is like also asked for help, and a nun walks around the corner and goes, I understand your situation.
Yes.
And you're like, what?
It's so
it's just so wild.
It's so good. It's so quick. Cody then rescues a man from Rufus, but Rufus kills the man anyway. This is the part where he was trying to get her to burn him alive.
Yes. This was also, I think, one of the, there's kind of like two of these, but speeches he gives that were, again, really reminiscent of like Devil's Advocate and Al Pacino.
Yep.
Like there's one where they're on the rooftop that was straight up the final Al Pacino speech. He says a line that's almost exactly what Al Pacino says. And again, not even a negative. I was like, yes, this is great. Like, that's great campiness. Like, just do more of that.
Yeah, I think this movie also has the line, the greatest trick the devil ever did was to convince people he didn't exist or whatever, which is in like 4 or 5 of these types of films. Like a version of that line is like in all of them. And then one of those moments that you were talking about, a man in a wheelchair shows up and just spells it all out for Kim. Exactly what's happening, just like exposition guy wheels up. I loved it.
Oh, that was Ian Holm, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, there's always that character. I'm trying to remember in Sinister, was it Vincent D'Onofrio? Is like the professor that he talks to.
I haven't
There's
seen
always
it.
like a professor they reach out to or
Yeah.
like an expert that comes in to consult.
Oh yeah. They're like, he's a cartologist, and you go up to them, and they're just like, blah 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 blah. And
Or a demonologist
yes,
usually. And you're
yeah,
like, I've never been a
that's
demonologist
that.
in my life.
Yeah, exactly. So, what'd you go to college for? Oh, demonology. Oh, all right.
That would be the ultimate show you should try to find
A
is find a
demonologist.
demonologist. And I mean, you have a million movies you could pick
Yeah,
to talk about with them, but that would be
they'd
incredible.
be like, well, my day job is Dairy Queen, so because no one hires a demonologist. But yeah, that would
Doesn't pay well.
does not pay well. The next scene, we get Rufus telling Cody to jump off of the building. Like it's a grown man
He's like,
convincing a child to jump off the building.
he's like, if your God's really special, he'll let you fly. Otherwise, come back to me. It's just like, whoa, all
And
right.
then she's like, "You first, right?" Is that the scene where she? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay. Then
It's kind of like, all right, you got me.
yeah. Then there's an awesome car chase. That was my note for that part of the movie. They catch Cody again, and she refuses to join them. And then I wrote, "Hold on, church surrounded by swarming gargoyles, and a kid pretends to be Cody and catches Kim."
Yes. Oh, yeah. Again, just see, like, I love her walking up to the church and seeing the swarming gargoyles again. It's just fantastic.
And here it is, everyone that's listening, the moment you've been waiting for, the moment where I'm pretty sure Nolan and I will become best friends through this movie. A swarm of rats forms the devil on a throne.
Yes. And it's like the most metal devil
It's so
ever.
rad.
Like, it looks so
Yeah,
cool. I mean, again, like, the effect itself is like, I mean, actually, I still think it is pretty
it's
solid
pretty
for
solid.
what this movie is.
Yeah,
Like, clearly they didn't have a ton of money and like, it only moves for a second, does what it needs to, but it's like really, really cool.
yeah. And I saw the swarm of rats and I was like, oh, good, the swarm of rats is back. And then it formed a giant devil in a throne, and I was like, what?
Yeah, yeah, it's a little scary.
It's pretty great. Rufus aims for Cody to shoot Cody, but hits Kim. Kim sees. I have a lot of question marks right here. Kim sees heaven? Question mark. Angels? Question. So does Angel and Rufus? Question mark. But then she gets healed by Cody. Jimmy kills Rufus, and then
Yeah,
he sees angels? Question mark. Like they
yep.
all.
Angels basically come in again. Someone asked for help there. The angels come in, distract Rufus Sewell so he can get shot by Jimmy
Yeah,
Smith.
a lot. He shoots him a lot too.
Yeah,
He really drops him. Yeah, and that's the end of the movie. It's it's I just released an episode today on the movie Hideaway, and it's kind of have a similar sort of angel devil ending situation, except in this the devil just was made of rats in a chair for 1 second and doesn't actually like fight anything, but the angels are there glowing and everyone sees them and everyone's just like, what? Oh. And then I imagine they just go about their business. I don't know what you do afterwards, like when you realize like, oh, we live in a world where these forces are at work. I don't know. It's
that is the kind of weird part about the ending is that like a lot of these movies end on like something grim or like the little kid sort of like hardened by the experience, but this ends with her being just like going back to being like super positive and
yeah.
happy. And like she's just gonna go fight the forces of darkness like pretty
Oh
easily.
yeah.
The final moment, incredible. You have one of the which I love the gang of kids that are
Uh-huh.
carrying out everything for the new dawn. And my wife was cracking up. She's like, "Are they all redheads? Like almost all of them are. Like they have dyed. They all have
They'll
like dyed red
yeah.
hair. They all look ridiculous." And then there's one at the very end who's running up to Jimmy and Kim
Yep.
and the little kid are walking away, and only the little girl sees him. She turns around, looks right at him,
Yeah.
and he just stunned by clearly seeing this like holy presence, drops his knife, turns, runs away, and has given up his evil ways, I guess.
Yeah.
And they play it off as a joke where like the girl turns around and like Kim Basinger was like, "You okay?" She's like, "Nah, it's fine. Everything's cool." And you're just like, this little like 7-year-old's gonna just go save the world very like cutely and petitely. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Well, there was also a squadron of children that are possibly also demons that now don't have a demon overlord. They're just running around, I
Yeah.
guess, randomly murdering people now because Rufus isn't there to be like, no, no, just Cody, like just well, and also Christina.
They could probably enlist with Shredder.
Yes, yeah, that's
They felt very much like the Team NT gang from
yeah.
the original movie.
I skipped over, but I
Um,
did love when Kim shows up at the building that Christina told her the address of, and there's two kids playing in front of it, and they're playing the dumbest game I've ever seen two kids play, where one kid throws a can half a foot in the air, and the other kid hits it against a wall a foot
well,
away.
yeah,
That's just what they're doing for like 10 minutes, and
yeah,
one kid, they're both I think redheads, and one of them has a different colored eye. That's how you know something's up
yes,
there.
yeah. He's got like a weird like milky eye contact
Yep.
or something.
Yeah. It's quite a crew they have there. But anyway, that's Bless the Child. Any final thoughts before we move on?
I would just say anyone who's into that subject matter of what this is in, like I think it will definitely scratch an itch because again, it reminded me, it just kept triggering so many other things. Like there was parts when this was reminding me a lot of The Empty Man,
Yeah.
just like
Oh,
the
yeah.
culty parts
Yeah.
and like all the stuff around the hospital. And I think it was like when Christina Ricci showed up, I had a little bit of like Empty Man vibes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just like, I don't know, a really surprising, fun little satanic thriller. Again, I kind of thought Chuck Russell ended his run of enjoyable movies at Eraser, but I think this is after Eraser, right?
Yeah.
I feel like he might have done something later or maybe something more recently, but
Yeah. I
yeah, this
didn't
one
even
is
look.
solid
I just
and
looked for like four of the classics basically that most people associate him with.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, it's
but
really well put together. It's not over long. There's some like stuff in the police station that kind of like I just skipped over because I'm like, it's just procedural stuff that is like, yeah, that's how they're gonna figure it out. But like, we already know all the pieces the whole time, so it's not really like that pertinent. There's stuff with a plant and things that I was just like, okay, well, I'm not gonna talk that much about this because it's very run of the mill, but it's not over long by any means, I don't think.
no. And there's a couple of those things that will tie into the short of stared stuff with Predator,
Mm-hmm.
but I can save that until we get into Predator. But one thing I did love though about the cops and the portrayal of the cops is that they're just very outwardly corrupt and also all dicks.
Yes.
To where like the one cop warns Jimmy Smits off of the nice cop who gave him a flower.
Yeah.
He's like, watch out for that guy. He's soft around the edges. And I'm like, what does that mean? He's nice?
Yes.
And
Watch
you're
out for
like,
them.
I was just so puzzled by that. But yeah,
It's a conflicting thing, those police with their
yeah.
flowers. But that brings us to the second film that we're pairing with this, which is The Predator from 2018. So 18 years later. Directed by Shane Black, who did The Nice Guys, Iron Man 3, and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Yes.
As a writer, Lethal Weapon, Monster Squad, and Last Action Hero. He's also in the first Predator, which is
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Written with Fred Decker, who did House, Night of the Creeps, and Monster Squad, of course. I watched this because of Fred Decker's name being attached, because I was just like, I've gotta see a Fred Decker Predator movie. And I think you feel Fred Decker in the script for sure.
Yeah.
Our cast, it's huge. There's so many people, but Thomas Jane, Jacob Tremblay, Keegan Michael Key, Olivia Munn. There's so many more people. I don't know if there's anyone you want to throw out there.
I really like Trevante Rhodes. I'm kind of surprised he hasn't gotten more like big roles. And then who I think is kind of the secret weapon of the movie is Sterling K. Brown, is like really, really funny.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think he adds a lot to it.
Yeah, I love, just right off the bat, I love the opening in space. That's one of the things I
Yes.
love about Night of the Creeps is that I always forget. I'm like, oh, right, we're starting in space. Like, I love
Yeah.
that. It's cool to see something with this big of a budget. Like I just maybe it was because I was coming from Bless the Child or something, and then this is the what fifth Predator or something in the series,
Yeah.
and I was just it just felt good that that these people were behind it and that they were having money to play with to make this thing, and I really
Yeah.
loved all of the references to all the other stuff. Like sometimes in these movies there's like five or six or franchises, whatever terminology you want to use, they get so like I don't know if it's crowd service is the common term you hear, or it's just like people that are like, well, we got to reference this. And in this one, I felt like they did it in so many different creative ways that like you might not even catch it unless you were someone that really loved specific films from this franchise. And sometimes it's like a turn of phrase and things that we'll get to, but sometimes it's just a quick visual cue and it's not someone standing there on screen being like, hey, remember this from, it's
Yeah.
just like, I just really appreciated it this time revisiting it, being like, oh my gosh, there's a real level of care and like love to this subject matter, which I really appreciated.
Agreed. And I'll say real quick, Shane Black is the reason I even got into the Predator at this point, because I was not someone who grew up watching these movies.
Hmm.
Like, I had a weird blind spot with both Aliens and Predator, where I had seen scenes and bits of them on like the movie channel and stuff like that, but like they're not movies I wanted to see for whatever reason. And then as soon as I got into both, I was like, oh, I love this. But I didn't even watch any of these. Well, no, I had seen Predators, but I didn't watch any of the other ones all the way through until this one was about to come out. And it was just because I love Shane Black. And so it was like, this is the reason I want, like, and Fred Decker. So, like, this was them reuniting for the first time since Monster
Hmm.
Squad. So I was very psyched for that stuff as well. And again, for all the faults that the movie has, I don't lay most of the blame at their feet. I think, well, as we'll get into, there's a lot of studio interference where they, kind of changed their third act quite a bit.
Yeah.
The first half is, I think, the strongest, and that is also where you feel the most like Shane Black and Fred Decker, firing on all cylinders. So
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And to piggyback on that, just the breakneck speed at which they are like working through things in the beginning of this, because we see like there's the ship, it's going down, the crash rapid introduction of the military, the neon blood, the mask, the efficient use of the person cut in half and that blood dripping on the predator's face, so we see it as it's
yeah,
cloaked. It's like it feels very Shane Black and Fred Decker. It's so smart, it's so quick. We have minimal dialogue. What a great opening to this situation that we know all the moving pieces for this part. We're just like, okay, got it. There's the cloaking, the voice recording manipulation.
yeah, it's really efficient, like you're
It's
saying. Like
super efficient, really satisfying.
it's basically condensing the first movie into that 5 minute sequence, because you have essentially a drug cartel
Yep.
deal going wrong, but it's just, one car instead of the whole other thing. And then, yeah, so like they do this, the Predator and Micro in the first 5 minutes, almost like the way
Yeah.
Evil Dead always has like
Yeah.
a prologue.
Mm-hmm.
Although the new one, I liked that it reversed, usually it's the before, and this time it was an after, or like events after.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like the beginning of this too.
Yeah, it's just I feel like that whole piece, like I just got super excited. And I'd already seen this before. And I don't know if I didn't give it a fair shake or what was going on, which is why sometimes I just tell people revisit something because sometimes you'll discover something new or maybe have a completely different watch. And for me, that's what this opening was. I was just like, "Oh, I love all of this." And then it came to a screeching halt as we're introduced to the kid. And I was just like, "Why are we what?" And then we get two bullies, and they pull the fire alarm, which I get it. One of them says, "Do it," which is a throw to the first Predator when one of the characters is
Mm-hmm.
going to be killed. And then the boy is sound sensitive, and yes, I had worked with numerous kids that had sensitivity to sound. The way that they use it in this movie is very, I mean, wish-washy. It's never comes back. It's a fire alarm, which is, I mean, we would get warnings. Other classes would not when there was a fire drill because that deafening sound would break out into like just a brawl. And so it was like some kids were 2-on-1. It's a very unsafe situation when you do something like this. And the way that this kid just shuts down, I did see kids do that, but he also is super capable and copes with it really well. It's like it's just wishy-washy is all I'm saying. I mean, everyone's different on the spectrum, as we said in the beginning. It's one of those things where I was like, you could have had him just be a nerd. Everything he does in the movie is just what a nerd would do, and he could be just bullied
Yeah.
for being a nerd. I also don't need the bullying stuff, but that's just me. Like, it just doesn't help anything. I mean, it does make the kid a
Yeah.
murderer later on, which is strange, but
Well, and that would almost feel like it almost feels like it should be there, in the sense of I can see that being it goes back to Monster Squad and
yeah.
like the kid bullying there. But because they made, they center it on him having Asperger's, and it's like such cringy like Asperger
Oh,
jokes, like
yeah.
where they're trying to make, and it's just like, this is not the way to do it.
No. And it's just like,
uh,
it's fine. It's brief, and I don't mean to nitpick at the Predator for not being sensitive, but it's just like, it's something that ties these two movies together is the idea that they're like both situations that go, how could we make the kid special? And it's like, they could just be special. They could just be a kid. I don't know.
I think there is like, and again, in some case, I'm willing to give a charitable reading to it where it's well-meaning but still ultimately harmful. But like the idea that they're like, I've just thought of this idea of like sort of Daredevil thinking, where like, that Daredevil lost his sight, gained his extra sense.
Sure, sure, sure.
So I feel like a lot of people try to apply that like magical thinking when they're thinking about this stuff without
Yeah.
thinking about it too deeply. So it's like, they have this disability, so surely they've got some benefit they get out of
Yeah.
it. It's like that's not how it works. You don't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's something you deal with. It's just yeah.
Yeah, I like that you said that it's not from a cruel place because it's not. It's just one of those things that of all the pieces in the film, I just don't think you need it. I think,
It feels very dated, is the thing. Like
well,
it just feels like it's from like a very old version of this story.
but they're trying to provide some sort of I feel like they're trying to provide some kind of like outcast situation here, like the kid is othered in this way because at the end when they bring it back to his dad and the kid's like, "I'm sorry I didn't grow up the way that you wanted." And then he's like, "I didn't grow up the way I wanted," which isn't really welcoming to what his kid is offering up in that moment. But I was just like, what
Yeah,
is this weird emotional anchor that like we don't need? And I feel like that's the two of those guys because they work together on Monster Squad. Such a great script. But in this one, we're just there for the predators. Like it's just a thing that like of all the things, I think if they shed it, it'd be totally fine. The kid can solve puzzles and stuff. I know people of all walks that are really good at math and we don't have to call them anything or give them any label. I look at a Sudoku puzzle and I just go, I'm out. I don't know. And then other people are great at it.
I don't want to get too deep into like the themes while we're still this early on, but
Sure.
like I've realized later on, like one, I don't think it necessarily carries out what it's trying to do emotionally, but I do see the intent, which when you
Hmm.
think of him along with the loonies as they call
Yeah.
themselves, they're meant to be people that are like discarded by society.
Hmm.
Like both groups are people that are, thought of as like less than. And so the movie's all about that group of people working together to take down this huge threat. But you really have to like work to get there, to
Yeah.
get to that
Yeah.
theme.
Yeah.
Like the movie doesn't really give you all of that, and you have to sort of fill in some of those blanks to get there. But it's like when you see behind the scenes stuff, you're like, oh, I totally get what they were going for because of one thing or another, studio stuff, whether it's that or not. Like those plot lines and character things didn't get like developed enough to end up being satisfying. So it just kind of feels like a weird, like, why is this piece here? What is this doing?
Right.
Because I remember the first time I saw it, even seeing the Loonies as like someone who has, issues with mental health. I feel like some people can be very critical of movies and their depiction of mental health. And,
Hmm.
a lot of them are very bad. But I also don't expect them to be like sterling. I also don't expect them all to be representative of everything.
Yeah.
But the first time I saw it, even though I really liked the movie, I was still like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about how the Loonies are and how all this is. And I still don't think it's perfect. I think I also ultimately trust Shane Black enough to where I think he was well meaning. I think even if some of the stuff's not there, I can sort of fill in the blanks, but I can also understand why they maybe didn't gel for everybody,
Yeah.
like the group of characters.
Oh, I mean, it was the first time I watched it. Thomas Jane was like, I was like, I can't. I've seen too many depictions of people where they're like they have tics and that this is that situation where he has Tourette's and I'm like here comes this is where all the bad language is going to come for laughter, and it's like that's very harmful to use someone like that for a punchline just to so you can have a dick joke or whatever. It's like I don't appreciate
And there's
that. And then I read that like Shane
yeah.
Black did it because he has Tourette's and then I was like, "Well, I didn't know that." But also did he think this was a good representation? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and then I just go, well, I mean, I trust Thomas Jane as an actor and Shane as a writer and director. So if this was the intent, then that's the intent. So it's that's totally fine. And I'm gonna bring my own baggage to movies all the time, and I have to check myself and be like, is this something that's really gonna keep me from enjoying this, or is this something that I can let go of and see what else the movie has to offer? And so in this watch, that's what I tried to do is just be like, look, I clearly have my hangups for how people are portrayed, like you said, with mental health or any kind of like labels and things. So, am I gonna sit through the Predator the whole time and be like, no, sir? Or if I'm gonna be able to be like, well, a man got cut in half and his guts spilled blood all over the Predator's face. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, let's put myself in that seat for the rest of the film and just go from that point.
There are definitely lines you have to let roll off though, because you're just like, whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's totally doable. It's totally
I
good.
agree. And the next thing that happens is at home, the boy gets a package from the postman, and the postman is Gary Chalk, I think is that right? The voice of Transformers Optimus Primal and occasionally
Oh,
Optimus
really?
Prime, yeah. And
Huh,
then
I
Peter
didn't know
Cullen,
that.
the original voice of Optimus Prime, provided the Predator's voice in the original Predator. So this is one of those
I didn't know
details
that.
where these guys know this stuff so well that the postmaster, because they voiced one of the Optimus Primal character, is representative. And it's just like that kind of details where I go, okay, clearly this movie was in the right hands at some point before interference was happening, and that's really awesome. Next, the movie introduces Olivia Munn. Oh, wait, no, it doesn't, because originally she had an introduction scene that was with Steve Wilder, but Munn let the studio know that he was arrested for attempting sexual relations with a 14-year-old days before picture lock, so they cut all of his footage, leaving us with the introduction of just Munn appearing on screen with no introduction.
Yeah. What I like about this movie, separate from the other Predators, and I do think each Predator does find a way to distinguish itself well.
Mm-hmm.
This one to me is like they're doing Predator as the event movie, as the 2000s, like the Armageddon or Deep Impact, where it's like something is like going to come destroy the world,
Yeah.
basically. So you always go grab 5 scientists from wherever, but that is definitely something that went into my first viewing watching this. Was, again, as someone who really likes and admires Shane Black quite a lot, especially as a writer, hearing that he was friends with this guy. Again, I don't know what his level of knowledge with everything was. I'm sure he knew some stuff. I don't want to pass the buck, but like, I do appreciate that it sounds like ultimately he handled it. I mean, after this had already happened, but like, I kind of held my enthusiasm for the movie until, and this sounds stupid, but like until hearing that him and Olivia Munn had talked. He basically had a face to face with her
Oh,
and like
okay.
really like apologized for basically putting her in a dangerous situation, essentially. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they weren't in danger there, but like putting her in a situation with someone that is not great and that she doesn't know that he is known to be not great. So it's, again, I don't think it's perfect, but like I appreciate that he made it right with her as much as he could. But yeah, that was definitely like hanging over the movie going into it. The first time was just like, oh, cool.
Yeah, and because of that cut too, they also lost footage with Edward James Olmos was in there too.
What?
Yeah,
I didn't even
he
know. I
was
didn't know he
involved
was.
in this movie and it was in those scenes, and because of that, it didn't make sense that he shows up later. He's like some sort of military commander or something, but because it was like all out of context, they just ended up scrapping the whole part.
I don't notice that stuff, but that's stuff where I wonder what else they cut from the
Yeah,
beginning.
yeah, yeah.
Because you see a lot of the cutting in the third act. You see how they sort of like, they're like, all right, we just got to put an end on this. But yeah, I didn't even think about like all the stuff that's just all the buildup they would have had to remove just because it was like scaffolding for stuff that they didn't get to.
Yeah, because like you said, like the opening, I mean the first half, it's pretty great. And the way that they're
Yeah.
moving the everything in the beginning, it's a big blockbuster, which is really exciting for something like Predator. I was just like, yes, okay, return to form. Here we go. And
Yeah.
then you start to kind of be like, wait, there's something, what's happening here? Why are we over at this part? It's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
We learn that the soldier's son is the boy that we've been randomly introduced to. The boy opens the box, finds the Predator mask and the gauntlet, and then we meet the outcasts, Thomas Jane with Tourette's. Olivia flies to a dam that's a special base run by Jake Busey. I love that. I love that
Yeah.
Jake Busey is
Yeah.
playing the son to his father in a Predator film. That's really awesome.
Yeah. That was very
They
fun.
give us a haunted mansion joke, which is really weird.
I love that every fucking
Yeah,
time,
it's
man.
like I love that. The boy is somehow messing with the next predator that's showing us up controls. He's like uncloaking the
Yeah.
ship for this predator who's getting frustrated at his ship. It was like a sequence where I'm like, this is definitely those guys' sense of humor, but something's been messed with here. The way that it's like playing out, I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah. It just felt very big for like this little kid tinkering around.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like, oh, he's the one. And like Shane Black is known for, he's always got a kid in the script. But the kid this time feels a lot more like in the way than they usually do,
mm-hmm,
or like a little too overpowered because you're just like, yeah, what? How is he? He's like hacking into this thing. He doesn't even really know how he's using it,
yeah,
and he's fucking with their ship. Like, come on.
yeah. It's of course not explained in any way.
Nope.
The next sequence.
Well, by the end, I guess it sort of is. We'll get there.
Yeah, the next sequence is one of my favorites because the thing that these two do understand is like what we want in a sequence. So if you're going to have a laboratory and you're going to have all the
Yes.
visual representation from all the different movies and some of the overlap with Alien, it's like so cool that because it's like you got to look for the minutia in the shots. It's not just like straight shot, like zoom. And then we have the predator laying there, and you're like, okay, cool. They're gonna dissect it, and they're like, it's been sedated, and then we go, oh. I bet it's not. And like, then we get the rampage. And the thing that I really, really, really love about this movie is I don't like it when I watch like a horror film or whatever. I'm gonna call this horror just for the gore part, but when you get the same kill over and over and over, like someone has a
Mhm.
machete, they kill everyone the same way with the machete. It's like no, 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 no. Like you could be inventive with the machete, and in this movie, the kills they just come up with the craziest like ways to smash heads and sever limbs and like it's so fun as like a fan of that kind of stuff even though a lot of
Yeah.
it is like CGI digitally stuff. It's still like creative in the way they're doing it that it's like you can appreciate the execution and the planning and imagine them gleefully writing it together and being like, "Oh, and then this." Like I don't know if that's what happened, but it's just like the rampage that happens was chef's kiss.
Yeah, I think now that like I hadn't really thought of it this way, but like really that lab sequence is probably my favorite sequence in the movie. And I
It's
think what
yeah.
really like locks you into it because I also love the aesthetics of like a lot of times it feels like it should be really bland that it's like this kind of classically all white lab. But when you have the predator as the contrast, and once he starts killing people and the blood's contrasting, it's so visually
Yeah.
awesome. Like it's a really, really fun sequence.
It's the only time a predator bites someone, too.
Really?
Yeah, in all the films.
Oh yeah, I guess they don't really
It
get
just
their
turns
hands
its
near
head
their
and
mouths very
no,
often.
they're
Yeah, it just
we
like nibbles
yeah, it
it.
just turns it just takes a bite and you're like, "Ooh, his weird little crab mouth bit him." Like, ugh, that's
Yeah.
disturbing.
Poor Jake Busey doesn't make it.
He doesn't. It's pretty good. Olivia Munn falling off the bus in the next sequence where they're just
Oh my
like
God.
escaping.
That was
Yeah,
great.
she shoots herself in the foot with the trank, and it's really satisfying. And then they see motorcycles, and someone says, "Get to the choppas," and I was like, "Okay, I see what you did there. Very nice." Then we get this joke where the predator gets in the back of a
Oh my
military
gosh.
man, kills everybody, and then uses a severed arm to give him the thumbs up. Where I was just like, okay, we're going to be very funny then. We're going to be very silly. Okay, the tone is kind of all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. Though you know what? I just thought about it for the first time that it's possible he had that thought because of the human DNA in them.
Oh,
I'm like, could
right.
that be? I mean, it could be anything, but it's like, well, I guess humans would do something dumb like this.
Yeah.
You could, I don't know, but I love that bit
Yeah.
because again, it feels like it wouldn't work in a lot of other cases, but like they pull it off.
Yeah, I agree. It's very fun. And then we get predator dogs, which is something where I was like, I don't know about the predator dogs, but we'll get to that.
And we had predator dogs and predators, but they were very different.
Yeah,
They had like bone tusks sort of all
yeah.
around
These
them.
look, I don't want to say unfinished, but I feel like the money went elsewhere. Um,
Yeah.
we then see the little boy in the mask, and he sees the
One of the best scenes when he's going trick or
no,
treating.
before that, he puts the mask up
Okay,
and he
okay.
sees Laser Predator story time. It's like gives us this like weird, I don't know, but then it's Halloween and the boy's wearing the mask and the gauntlet out trick or treating. He looks awesome. A kid throws something at the boy's head and he juices the dude. He straight up murders a kid.
Little Jacob Tremblay blows someone up in front of his bullies who will now never fuck with him ever again.
It's like
I loved it.
it happens and I go, "Oh, he's a killer." Wow. Okay. And then I wrote, "I don't think the dogs were done." That's the next thing I wrote. Then there's a part where Olivia Munn says, "Can your kid turn down their psychosis?" Where I was like, "Oh, oh,
Yeah.
okay, huh." But then they introduced the bigger predator, which was again, I'm like, okay, Shane Black and Fred Decker, here they are. Like, we're gonna do it bigger than before. There's lots of capturing. I wrote there's lots of tripping because in this whole part, the squad gets captured again, and then each one of them escapes capture by like hitting someone and then kicking their feet out from under them. I was like, oh, that's really a move, I guess that works. And then they follow the dog, and I was like, I don't know, in
Yeah.
a helicopter. The government uses the kid to open the ship. We get a variety of kills, stabbings, beheadings, laser removal of limbs. Really satisfying sequence. Again,
Yeah.
like they play out these like battle parts so that it's not just blind fire at something or it's just it's all good. Then we get the final hunt. The CGI gore, while appreciated, does look unfinished in some of this, and I think that was
So dark
yeah,
too. That forest sequence is just like the mo like The thing I think of that is the biggest indication of just the messiness of the movie overall is like somebody point out when Sterling King Brown
Yeah,
dies. It is so hard to do. Every time I watch it, even I'm like, I have to watch for it, and it's so
so
quick.
quick.
They don't remark on it at
Mm-mm.
all, and you just move right past it. And if you don't see it, you're just like, what? He's gone forever? Okay.
Yeah, it is so abrupt. And at first I was like, maybe that's for comedic effect, but I don't think it is. I think it's when things started to get really like chopped.
Yeah.
They also present that Asperger's is the next step in evolution, where I was like,
Yep.
okay, we're getting tricky here. Then there's the flying on the top of the ship sequence where I was like, this is really dumb. I don't need this at all until they cloak and the
Yes.
force field cuts off the dude's.
Nettle's legs. Yeah.
And then I was like, I'm back in on the force field. I don't know how the air
Yep.
bubble works that he's underneath, but like, I love
And like
this.
I hate that Trevante Rhodes goes out in what feels like such an inconsequential way because like he didn't really need to, and it
Yeah.
was kind of just screwed. In some ways, it's like Nettle's got the cool cloaking death,
Yeah.
whereas like he's just like another cloaking death. But he does go out on a good note, and again, that character is great. So
Yeah. He was really great. I wish he hadn't died that way too, as well. The ship crashes. We get a really long fight sequence, which I guess they had to reshoot this whole part because it just wasn't satisfying to people's standards. But it goes forever, and it doesn't do the laugh, which I was really shocked. I thought we were gonna get the bomb explosion
oh
laughter.
yeah,
That's fine. And then we get to this sequence, which is really interesting, where they have these metal pods, and the boy is now working for the government.
working with the
He's
government.
got
I
his
guess he's a
own.
liaison
His
or
dad walks
something.
in and goes, "You have your own desk," and I'm like, "You're his dad. Where have you been? Like, what is going on? Where's the mom? Does she know what's happened?" It's like I have so many questions. But they have these two metal things. One of them clearly looks like a coffin, and they're like, "We're gonna open these." And in my head, I was like, "If this is Arnold Schwarzenegger in there, this will be amazing." And then I read, do you know what it was supposed to be?
It was supposed to be Arnold Schwarzenegger originally.
There was someone before that.
Was it Carl? What's his name?
No,
Carl Weathers.
Ripley from Alien. They
Oh,
were originally going to be Ripley. They had signed on, at least this is what I found in my research, they signed on her stunt double from the movies to play it because obviously they couldn't get Sigourney Weaver. And so that was going to be the secret weapon is that they open up the metal coffin and
damn.
there's Ripley. And instead we get this weird piece of metal that becomes a super suit thing, which had to have been part of a reshoot thing. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, that is 100%. So I didn't know about the Ripley one. I know at one point originally they wanted to bring Dutch back,
yeah.
and so Dutch was also going to be in there. And maybe this is tied with the Ripley thing, but I feel like I also heard at one point that like there was going to be like just like the alien egg or something, or it was going to be like something else that was introducing the idea of AVP
Hmm.
happening again. And then yeah, it sounds like this one was very much like the rewritten and give him an Iron Man suit, I guess. And like I didn't I think I was actually okay with this when I first saw it. This is the moment that's gotten I feel like worse as it's as I've gone like really for me the movie kind of peaks at the halfway point and then from there it's a lot of downhill, which is once the physical predator is gone,
Yeah.
it's a lot less fun. I like the idea of the big predator.
Mm.
It is just a bummer that he is just a big CGI predator
Yep.
and he looks good enough, but like he doesn't look as good as the guy that was just there in a
Yeah,
suit.
I agree.
I love the design of the outlaw predator or whatever he's called. The big one, again, he's just kind of like even more primal, but not quite as like primal as like he is in Prey, where like you've got the sort of like cow skull thing that makes him look old fashioned. This is just like he's kind of just wearing his little nothing. Like
Yeah.
he's just got like kind of like a little battle skirt, battle dress
Yep.
thing, and then that's it. I will at least say I like a lot of his kills. He does
Yes.
have a couple, like you mentioned, the sequence where he is in the McKenna's house and taking out all the agents or whatever. Incredible. Like he bursts through the floors and
Yeah.
stuff like that. His kills, I think, are like where he shines. But I think the initial sort of shock of seeing the like much bigger predator. But again, he's just not as cool as like a regular predator in a suit that
Yeah.
like you can really see there. And they get so reliant on him later on, and everything else becomes a dark, blurry mess. It's just kind of like a lot of the fun of the Predator is lost. I still enjoy the second half, but it's a big, for me, it's a pretty big drop off. Like if the movie continued from the way it was in the first half, I think a lot more people would be way into this. but it feels like that's where the changes start happening to accommodate all the, whatever interference messiness happened.
I think the whole introduction of that giant predator is because they're like, well, because this tech was stolen and this is how the guy came or whatever. So I appreciate that there's like some storytelling to it because that's my big problem with like the dinosaur movies is that like every new one for Lost World or whatever, they're like, and then there's a bigger dinosaur. And I'm like, who had problems with how big the first? They're still super deadly. The predator is
Yeah.
terrifying and murderous. You don't have to make a bigger one to be like, well, now it's a threat. It's like, no, it was killing everyone just a second ago. Like,
The fact that he's the alien predator
yeah,
is what makes him that big other.
yeah,
It's weird just because like that to me, like Shane Black seemed really in the behind the scenes stuff, seemed really like interested in this idea,
hmm
but like that doesn't to me feel as like, I don't know, for someone who is so clever in his writing, this just feels like, yeah, you went bigger, cool.
yeah.
But I think it does at least fit with the sort of like event nature of the film as far as like the threat really is bigger this time. But yeah, it doesn't totally work. And yeah, he's the weaker element of the movie for sure.
Yeah, that and for me, the dogs. But that's just me. the
The dogs are also where you can see messiness too because they keep the one lobotomized dog around, which again, if they
sure.
developed it right, would be great because he fits in with the loonies. He's
Mm-hmm.
also should be dead and discarded and all that. And he's basically like a perfect parallel to what Trevante Rhodes,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't do anything with it. He shows up occasionally, and then like at a certain point, he's just edited out because they just move on and you never see him again.
Yeah.
It's like the human dog that you also see at one
Yeah.
point. He also just
Yeah.
disappears, and you're like, why did you show him in the first place?
Yeah. Why did you hire that real dog?
Yeah, it's just weird.
It's bizarre. But luckily, we have both these movies where the children really are the future.
Yep, yep. Again, this gets into the specialness of the children in both of these. I mean, it would have been fun if it wasn't a weird, groany sort of reveal, but the big predator kiss being like, "Oh, we need to get McKenna, we need to get McKenna,"
Oh,
and then
yeah.
like the reveal being, "We're talking about the kid," but then you're just like, "What? This big predator is
Yeah.
coming to Earth because he wants this one particular autistic
Yeah.
kid?" Well, no, because I guess that's happening because he interfered, but
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I kind of like the idea of the world's getting closer to ending, so the predator like snapping up more things, but also I don't know that it really is like if you think about it for more than a minute, it's just like okay, whatever.
Yeah. I also love the mask is sitting in his room and the predator that's on Earth zooms in on his artwork and his
Yeah, it's like
address.
Rory McKenna.
Yeah, and that happens like three times in the movie where I'm like, what do these predators care about his artwork? And like, do we need him zooming in on like what city he lives in? Because I'm pretty sure they have high-tech tracking situations. Like,
Or like, do they not have like kids on their planet who also draw scribble versions of things?
right.
Because I feel like he should be like, why am I looking at this crude writing? Or you know what I mean?
Right.
Instead, he's just like, no, I get that. That's a kid's writing. Moving on. Like
Mm-hmm.
he just rolls right with it. It's very,
Totally get it.
very funny.
Yeah, those predators. This was the last
Yeah.
Predator movie, right? We haven't had anything since?
We did have Prey,
Oh, Prey, right.
um,
Oh, forgot about Prey.
which I really liked. Prey.
Same.
I hope they get to do some more with those because again, these feel like just an easy. You can do something different with them every time. You can do something small again. I mean, I like that they went big for this one.
Yeah, felt cool.
They hadn't really done that. Like the old ones were still pretty like small scale, and this felt like yeah, let's make it a big event. I love that idea, but yeah, it feels like
What was the one with Adrian Brody? Yeah,
Predators.
that didn't feel big to me because it was like mostly on that
Yeah,
planet. It's just kind of like, I don't know, felt small. Whereas this, because they, start out in space and bring us down to Earth and all the scope and the music and extensive cast, I was just like, this is a blockbuster, but I actually care about the subject matter. It's very exciting for me. Like,
yeah,
usually I
yeah.
don't.
I'm hoping it's not a deterrent for more like that, but I don't think Shane Black's done anything since it.
Oh
It kind
no.
of put him in director jail. It feels like, which sucks. Yeah, and Fred Decker, I don't feel like he's done anything else either. Unfortunately, I was excited that he got to do some work again though, because I don't think he got a ton in the 2000s. It's one of those movies where you can. I mean, it's like Spider-Man 3, which I like. I have a big fondness for Spider-Man 3 just because Sam Raimi is one of my favorite directors. But that's a movie you can feel the interference on. You can
Oh
feel
yeah.
there's too many hands, there's too many cooks in the kitchen, and I feel that way with this movie. I still enjoy it, but you could just feel messiness throughout.
Yeah, I think that that's important though to talk about in a world where people just rate things on Letterboxd 2 stars or whatever, that a movie can be messy but still enjoyable. Maybe not all the parts work for us for this movie in particular, but there's still, like as we said, sequences where I'm just like, I would watch the whole thing just for this. Like, just give me
Yeah.
this rampage. And, I was grinning ear to ear when they revealed just the iconography of the other series and things. It just was so clever and fun the way they brought stuff in, and I really like appreciate all of that. So I'm glad that you mentioned it so we'd rewatch I'd rewatch it because I had mentally just written it off as like, nah, and this time I had way more fun with it.
I'm glad. I feel like most people who bounced off it were kind of content to let it stay that way.
Mhm.
And for me, it was like I came out of it kind of on a high, and then I feel like I've kind of like gone down on it some, but it's also something that I've still watched like probably like 5 times since it came out. And like
That's
I don't
good.
do that with everything.
That's good.
So I've also, because like watching them for that movie coming out was the first time I kind of went through the series. I've just been like watching the series a bunch more. But again, I've still been able to enjoy it every time, even with all the
Yeah,
caveats. So
that's fantastic. Well, there you have it. The Predators and Bless the Child, the best pairing two people have ever put together for an episode.
yeah,
Nolan, where can people find you?
you can find me on Twitter at Nolan_McBride or the show's handle, which is at Dead Ringers Pod.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for putting
Thanks
up
for
with
having me
all
on.
my scheduling conflicts. It was ridiculous, but it's a pleasure to meet you.
No, not a problem. Not a problem. This
Fantastic.
was a blast.
I'm Dirk Marshall, vh-us.com. You can find us on social media at vhus_podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll be here next time on VHS.